On this episode of Athletic Training Chat, we have host Mercedes Himmons talking with Aaron Jackson, and this is actually a two-part episode, with this one focusing more so on mental health and some of the research that Aaron has been doing around mental health and student athletes. They get very deep into it and the importance of addressing it, and it couldn't come at a better time given some of the tragedies that we've had in the athletics population with mental health, and just the topic in general is one that has to continually be talked about. Part two, which will be out a week following this, focuses on Aaron's young professional career, how things are going, and addresses a bunch of other topics as it relates to athletic training. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please check them out for your athletic training needs. If you've got ideas, reach out to them. If you want to try something, reach out to them. They'll get you connected with your rep. They're definitely here to help athletic trainers and continue to help us do what we need to do. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode.
Okay. And it's told you that you recording too, or like,
You
all right,
good?
cool.
Yep.
All right. I just wanted to make sure. I don't know about the tech. I'm still learning. What time is it? We still good morning.
It's still good morning. It's still good morning.
Little rocky start, but we're here. So this is, I don't know what number episode. I think maybe 101. And we are with Aaron Jackson, who is an athletic trainer. And we met on the social media. I think it was Twitter, not Instagram, probably.
Yeah.
So we have not met in person yet, but I'm sure we will meet at NATA.
Hopefully, Lord.
Fingers crossed. Ooh, NATA. Yes. So that'll be exciting. So Aaron, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. My name is Aaron Jackson. Also, most of the AT world or my athletes know me by AJ. I'm originally born and raised in Queens, New York. Spent about 25 years of my life there. I currently live in New Orleans, Louisiana. I work for Osher Sports Medicine as a outreach athletic trainer, and I currently work at Xavier University of Louisiana, where my sport assignment is baseball and cheerleading. Educational background. Okay, so I got started at Utica College in 2013 when I came out of high school. I originally was going to do the PT route, but then decided to kind of shift gears a little bit after working as a athletic training assistant a little bit for our football team there. And then 2016, I made the jump to Stony Brook, where I graduated in 2019 with my Bachelor of Science in Athletic Training. From there, I went on to Temple University, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, under the leadership of Dr. Jamie Mansell, shameless plug. And then I graduated this past May with my degree in kinesiology with a concentration in athletic training, as well as a graduate certificate in teaching in higher education. So that's a little bit about my educational background. I do plan on going back to school in the near future. Haven't decided on when or where yet, but that's coming shortly.
Okay. I'm gonna just shamelessly plug. Make sure you rest.
Yeah.
Have some time to yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to jump right in, that's up to you. But I'm just gonna say,
I'm a nerd, so a part of me wants to continue like pushing for like some deeper knowledge in some areas, especially rehab. So when I do decide to choose to go back to school, I'm probably 65% going to get my DAT. Not sure where yet.
Okay.
There's a toss up between two schools that are still
Of
fighting for
course.
my allegiance at this time.
They better
But
fight hard.
um, I think it's really important for me to continue to kind of push that boundary of really education in my eyes. I do plan on teaching at some point in my career, so
Okay.
I'll get back into teaching at some point in my career because that's what I did while I was at Temple. I was a graduate teaching assistant where I taught anatomy and physiology lab. So for me, teaching is kind of what is my end goal eventually, or probably having that kind of dual split role where you kind of teach and do, clinical work at the same time. So, eventually got to go back at some point. So,
Yes. Okay.
got to do all I'm young and got a little energy because when I get older, I'm like, I don't want to do it. I want to do
That's fair. It's a lot, so I understand. So we can jump right into our questions that we have specifically for this episode, and we're probably going to touch base on student athletes and mental health, which I'm very excited to talk about because I've been vocal about my own mental health journey on social media, as well as how I personally try to put that in for my patient population. So just to see your thought process and how you think athletic trainers play a role in it, and what can we do to really keep our patients together holistically, not just, with their injuries or just their sport things that they have to do. And then we'll also talk about, young professionals in the beginning of their career. You're still in that early
professional,
career, young professional phase. So that's always exciting to talk about. And, just think about any things that you have in mind that I guess I don't want to say I'm seasoned because I think I'm only a year 10 or 11. So, how
that's the
we
career advanced, your career.
Yes, there we go. There we go.
Still in that YP phase, but starting to transition on and upward.
Exactly. So, how can we help you as a young professional to just really thrive? Like, that's a passion for mine because me, I'm very much, I know what I went through. Granted, it wasn't super rocky, but some things I may have wanted along my way. What can I do to help you? That's me as a person. But as an athletic trainer as well, how can I help you to thrive? So I'm excited to see what you have to say. So for our first question, can you describe your master's research so we're all on the same page to begin?
Yes. So this began back in back in undergrad, actually. So I started doing research back in undergrad, looking kind of at mental health and injuries, specifically like orthopedic injuries versus like those non-season ending injuries and concussions. So I finished my project there, and then when I went to Temple, I knew I kind of wanted to do something similar in that mental health kind of range, but I didn't know what exactly. I wasn't sure if I was going to be injury related or it was going to be concussion related because Temple's a big concussion school. So I kind of end up settling on the topic of reported rates of anxiety and depression at baseline. So me and Dr. Jane McDevitt, who I love to death, she was a great mentor and advisor for me, like going through that thesis process. We kind of sat down and kind of, it was a rocky start at first, kind of figuring out what we were going to look at, how we were going to look at it, what variables were we going to assess. But we kind of just figured out, okay, you want to do mental health. Here's your passion for it. How do we make it work so that you can finish your thesis in 2 years? So we basically took 2 patient-reported outcome measures, the hospital anxiety and depression scale and the short form 12. And we kind of used those 2 scales to kind of see and compare disclosure of anxiety and depression at baseline. So we kind of said, hey, like, are you disclosing something at baseline? Yes or no? And how are you scoring on it, on these outcomes to see, are they similar? Are they not similar? And that's kind of the gist of the research. I can go way more into depth, but we're going to keep it really PG. I try to keep my nerd hat off a little bit, but
no, listen, nerd out. I want to know. I'm sure the viewers and listeners want to know. So
I got you.
we'll go.
I think so. The next question. So we talked. I think the next question you had on there was talking about themes of the research, right?
Yes.
Right. So we kind of had a couple of different themes. But I say the main theme was mental health, right? We want to see what our patients are experiencing when they first come in to begin their season. So at Temple University, I would say I had a really good opportunity. We had a sport concussion lab working with a lot of our club sports teams. So we had about, I think it was about 7 or 8 teams that we had. What they would do is they would come in and kind of fill out this kind of questionnaire. Like it would be like kind of a little packet. They would kind of go through patient history stuff, previous injury, number of concussions. Hey, do you have anxiety and depression, or have you been diagnosed before in the past? Are you currently taking medication? So we wanted to kind of zone in on that patient demographic section first, right? The history part first, because that kind of told us, hey, we might need to look out for this as we keep going throughout their packet. Then they moved on to answer some other questions. They signed a consent form. And then they got into taking our patient report outcome measures. So they did both of those. I always told them, hey, just be honest and truthful while answering it to the best of your ability. And then we kind of took that. I kind of would sit down. I would score each one based on the scoring system for the HAD and the scoring system for the SO12. Then we kind of took all that information, kind of put that into an Excel spreadsheet, ran a little statistics, but going back to the themes, we wanted to really look at medication was one, medication usage was one, mental health disclosure was the second one. But I think the overall theme, we really want to see like which patient reported outcome could assess what we were looking for, right?
Okay.
Could we sit down and say the HADS at the end of the day or the SO12 at the end of the day was the best outcome measure to assess if someone disclosed or didn't disclose anxiety and depression, and how did they compare?
Right.
So unfortunately, we ended up, and it's going to say unfortunately, but my goal when I got into it was to hit about 500 participants. That was my goal.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we didn't get to hit that goal because of COVID, right? COVID came in and said, well, we're going to put a pause on that. So it was unfortunate because we were on a great trajectory of, I think we finished out with like 360 some participants.
Okay.
Still a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But what we did was we took the data from 2016 because we backtracked. So we took data from 2016 all the way up until 2020. So that almost like 3.5 year span, we took all that data, crunched it, excluded some people here and there where necessary because, hey, they may have not have filled it out the correct way.
Mm-hmm.
A whole bunch of other different factors, and we finished around 330 some odd people. So for me, that was pretty good. And then kind of what we figured out at the end was, hey, the hospital anxiety and depression scale, which is a 14-item patient reported outcome that assess 7 questions assess anxiety, 7 questions assess depression, right? We kind of saw that scale in particular actually was able to distinguish between patients who self-disclosed anxiety or didn't self-disclose anxiety and depression at baseline. So as an athletic trainer, right, we get to see, so we kind of take that information and say, okay, what do we do with it, right? That's always the question. We do all this research. What do we do with it? How do we sit down and kind of figure out what do we do? Right. I think the first thing as an athletic trainer, you can, even as a person, we're going to talk about what do you do with information that you see? I think, well, you think about it first. You don't make any rash decisions just because some research came out, because there's flaws, there's flaws in every given research project that under the sun. But I think for me, especially, I'm going to be very critical of my own project because I think it's important, is that, well, if are there things I would have done differently 100%, right? I would have wanted to I wish I could have started in 2016, right? Because that way I'd have known that every person that would have filled it out the correct way, just like the people at the tail end filled it out the correct way, right? So that's something you would want to change. When anytime you're dealing with patient-reported outcome measures, you are trusting your patient, to your athlete, whoever you're dealing with, to fill this out correctly. Yes. And with little to hopefully no influence, right? But sometimes they be like, oh, well, this is just another thing, piece of paper I got to fill out. So they just go check, right? And sometimes that's not always accurate, right? So we can go and kind of take that approach to it and say, well, that was some flaws of the research. And we talk about limitations of my project. But I think the overall arcing theme of the project is to say that athletic trainers need to really, really start as a collective, no matter sport, really start taking a deeper dive into the mental health aspect of sport performance, right? Because we know our athletes go through so much on a given day between workouts, practice, class, study hall, then we add the big family thing into it as well. And then they trying to figure out, how do I balance it all? And especially for our young freshmen who are coming in, never done it before, or even you're a JUCO product coming from a JUCO where the demands were maybe a little less. Then you bump it up to the D1 level or the D2 level. It could be a lot. So for me, what I respect a lot from a lot of programs in the country, and I spend a lot of time looking at what programs are doing what at that baseline phase. And a lot of programs are really starting to implement like some type of questionnaire, whether it be super yes or no based, or if it's a little more, hey, we're going to include some type of scale here to kind of figure out what our athletes are going through at baseline. And then you have some people in some places who do it go to the extreme, which I love. There's a athletic trainer who works at the University of Texas when I first started following her work, what she did with her athletes, I wanted to model that. So basically I think she's the head athletic trainer, director of sports medicine, don't get me wrong, at the University of Texas at Austin. And basically she works with volleyball, and she takes a holistic approach to healthcare, and which I love, because what she does with her athletes is, it was a quick 2-minute and 30-second video that the University of Texas put out on her and her volleyball athletes, and holistic approach that she took to how they win, right? They're one of the best volleyball programs in the country. And one thing that she does some type of questionnaire with her athletes every 2 weeks, right? Where it's very short, sweet, to the point. And some people, you might say, oh, that may be too much. Hey, but she's seen great results from it, right? They have a lot of sports performance people who integrated as well. They have their dietitians on board, they have nutritionists on board, and then they get to the psychology aspect of it, and they have their sports psychology staff on board as well. So like everybody's on board of this idea of producing a holistic approach to sports, to sport performance and sport participation. So I think that's kind of where I hopefully see our profession going in the next couple of years, with like mental health, and just a lot of athletic trainers, right? And you talked about your experience, you have your own mental health stuff, so do I. We go through our own stuff personally, so I imagine the stuff that's what I want to try to get athletic trainers to understand, right? You knew what it was like for you as an undergrad student, going through your own mental health stuff just as a student, right? Then add that plus a little extra for your student athlete, right? And I think when we start to sit down and really be empathetic, right? We ain't gotta live the experience, but we can understand and just listen. I think that starts to make the big difference, and that's going to be the way we as a profession can really start, pushing the boundary forward of mental health. And I'm not saying that mental health is not holding your athletes accountable. I think that's a whole different conversation that I don't think we got time to get into. But I think there's levels to it, right? I think mental health is telling your athlete, hey, like, okay, I support you here. How can I support you? And then sometimes it's holding your athlete accountable too. Like that's a part of the mental health process as well. Like going through therapy, your therapist is going to hold you accountable for some of the stuff that you do or don't do. So I think there's a lot, that athletic trainers can do. And I think that's probably another question I'll spend on more. But I think that's kind of the gist of my research, and then kind of tying it back to clinical practice, and how we as athletic trainers kind of improve from there.
Yes. So I 100% agree with everything you just said. I'm on board. I wrote a little note on my paper, like, oh, I should probably do that, like get that in. And I think that will tie into the next question, how can we as athletic trainers assist our patients in their mental wellness? And just from what you were saying previously, I did go ahead and take that extra step to look into the mental health of just one of my teams. And granted, I only did it for half of the year. And it's something I know that I want to implement moving forward for the entire year. So with our intake forms, for our PPs for every student athlete, we do have that initial mental health screening. And if something is red flagged, they'll follow up with our team physician, and us as the athletic trainer, we kind of monitor everything and do our part. And then me specifically, I went ahead and I did make it a requirement. Sometimes it wasn't done on time, but I had one of my teams fill out the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7 every 2 weeks. So it was a lot. And I think specifically for this semester, it was extra because specifically for that team, we had probably 5 rescheduled games in the beginning of the semester that we had to then put through the rest of the semester. So they were playing games Monday, Wednesday, Saturday for about 6.5 weeks. So I was like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, how can I keep them together, not just for basketball, but how can I keep them together in general? Because they have this added stress of I have to perform 3 times a week instead of just 2, or maybe just 1, and still do my academics and still try to be involved in a social aspect. Maybe, but it was very eye-opening, which I kind of already had an idea of where they were. At first they weren't honest, so I said, listen, y'all, I know y'all didn't fill that out right, so we're gonna do it again. The honesty aspect, woo.
And I think the honesty aspect is such a big deal with. But I think the way you can kind of combat that, right, is I always say it's about relationship first. And this is not answering the question. No, it is answering the question perfectly, actually. It's about relationship, right? And I think sometimes athletic trainers, when we have such large teams, it's hard to build individual relationships with each individual person, especially if you are the sole athletic trainer at a high school, or you're a sole athletic trainer for this large roster team. It's hard to build a relationship with each individual person. But what I will say it's important is for you to build relationships where you can to start, right? You just you just start. And that's what I try to tell a lot of people when I talk to them. They're like, well, where do I start? It starts with every beginning starts with a single step, right? You don't got to take, I ain't saying you got to take a large step. I ain't saying you can take a baby step. Shoot, you can crawl before you even take a step if you want, and that's fine. But at least you're starting somewhere. And I think once we as clinicians start to get like, oh man, this is tough. But I think sometimes if you think about it, it's also helping you at the same time, right? Let's say I put it this way, as athletic trainers, me and you both know that we go through a lot on a daily basis between just work related, but then you add the outside factors of my personal life on top of that, it's a lot, right? So I would say model what you want from your athlete, right? Or your patient population. If you want them to do this, hey, you do every 2 weeks with them too, right? Because that's how you model the behavior that you want, right? Okay, we can model, and I'm a big basketball guy, so like if I want to model behavior on the court when it comes to warm up, hey, maybe I got to be out there with them when they doing the warm up, but not trust them to do it by themselves. It's the same idea, right? I think it's the same principles that we've always had toward athletic training, but applying it in a different aspect. That's the only difference. And I think people are scared because it's uncharted territory. But when I say how do we figure it out? And to answer the question even more, one starts with relationship. 2, it starts with the conversation, right? We're pretty good at having conversation. Yes, we are pretty good at it. And I would say some of the best in the game at it. If we being honest, we can have a conversation about anything on any given day at any given time. And that's the same thing how it goes to our athlete. Our athlete is not, from my perspective, how it's been for me, our athlete's not asking us to walk their, sometimes they are, to do everything for them. Some athletes will want that. But I'm a big believer on that's not going to happen, right? Because I know when you step outside of this bubble that is college for you, you have to deal with a lot of other stuff. So how can I instill in you some values and some lessons that can help you on the outside long after you graduate college and you have not, you're done playing basketball, baseball, whatever the case may be. And that's what it is for me, right? It's instilling values and core values in individuals so that when they start, and that's what mental health is too, in its essence. It's like helping these kids develop, right? We're asking, and like I said, I can go talk about this all day long, but I think the most important thing, but I think this really has to be said, the most important thing as an athlete trainer you can do is develop your kid to be a better individual rather than a better athlete. I don't want to tell me. You can say, yeah, our job is to develop the student athlete.
Right.
No. Our job is to develop the person. It's the athlete that we get to shine, that gets to shine. But okay, listen, I always tell my athletes, I can care less about what you do on a court, on a field, but I care about what you do, one in the classroom and then what you do outside the classroom. Yeah. What's your character like on the outside, right? Because you can have one personality from sport, but then you have another in the classroom. So are you giving the same intent to your work? Are you giving the same intent to what you participate in on campus? Those things, for me, those are the things that matter, because those are the things. Not saying that sport does not help develop character, but it definitely does. Right. But there's other aspects to it. And I think sometimes we get a little caught up in just the athlete aspect and forgetting that there's a person involved too. Yes. Right. And we talked about before the holistic approach. The holistic approach, for those that might not understand it, is treating the entire person and not just a certain section, right? Just not treating the injury or just not treating the athlete, right? Yep. It's treating the whole entire person so that they can thrive holistically, that every part of them can thrive, from the physical to the spiritual to the emotional to the mental, right? It's a whole holistic approach. It's the whole idea. So I think for me, like, when I sit down and when I try to talk to other athletic trainers about the topic, people are like, oh, well, I got too much time on my hands. I'm like, I get it. Right now we're going through an athletic training shortage. So there's a lot of, but I think if you have the chance, and you have, like, let's say you are at D1 University and you have a small team and you like 15 people, just implement something to start, right? Start somewhere. It could just be, hey, we're going to do weekly check-ins every week and we're always good at the check-ins anyway, right? When our athlete comes in, what's the first thing we always say?
What's up?
How you doing today?
Yep.
Like, what's going on? Like, how's class?
Yep.
We do that, but how about instead now we put it on a tablet, or we put it on a piece of paper. So when our athletes come in for a rehab or just to check in, taping, whatever, hey, go knock out your check-in for the week. Knocking your check out for this 2-week block. Yeah, because we know, and you probably can attest to this, like, a lot can change in 2 weeks. Whew. Right? You can go from an athlete being here 1 week to athlete being here the next week to the athlete being back down here to being back up here. They might plateau up here for a couple weeks, right? Like you said, that 6-week block, maybe you would have solved some. I guarantee your numbers were crazy a little bit, right? So. And that's where we gotta start. I think you don't gotta reinvent the wheel. I think the wheel is already invented. You don't gotta reinvent it. And we play such a large role, right? But I think another person who plays the biggest role is the coaching staff, right? To try to get them also to buy into the idea, because you got a lot of coaches out here that be like, oh yeah, mental health, but then will act and say another thing, right? So I think it's a important thing about getting the ATs involved, and the ATs trying to get the coaching staff involved, and getting the ATs also getting their strength and conditioning staff involved. Because, hey, maybe you realize as an athletic trainer, you say your team we ain't doing so hot. maybe instead you might talk to your strength and conditioning coach and say, hey, like, is there any way we can just do like a recovery day for them? They come in and just do recovery stuff, or be like some mobility. They do some stretching as a team just to get them together and shoot at the end. Maybe they just do some mindfulness stuff at the end and then call it a day.
Yep.
And that's their lift for the day. Not saying that they won't get another lift throughout the rest of the week, but maybe this day we getting hit hard. We've been through so much over the last week or couple weeks. This is maybe how we get into it. So I think we play an integral role. You like every athletic trainer knows that we make the ship go. If we ain't there, the ship don't go.
It ain't sailing.
And I try to tell people, like, you think, and not saying, and it's the coach. I love coaches who will attest to it. If it wasn't for my athletic trainer, hey, my team wouldn't be where we were. Or,
exactly.
You know, so I think that's really how we start, right? That's the role we play. And the way we continue pushing forward is just having those conversations, being authentic. Like, for me, I ain't gonna sugarcoat it. Like, my kids, like, I work with a cheer team, and they say I'm a cheer dad, and I've accepted that is the role that I play on that team, right? Yeah. But with my baseball team, I play a different role. I don't play that same role. So like, every team sometimes requires a little bit of different type of athletic trainer. So some need a little more hard skill, like hard. I'm a really be on you. Some might need a little more relaxed. So I think that's how you play it, right? I think that's the role that we play, and we're vital at being able to change on the drop of a dime, and not being afraid to change. I think is a big thing. Yeah. I'll get into a little more of that when we talk about YPs later on, and how, like the question you asked earlier, how can YPs, how can people who have been in the game for a while help YPs? I got a lot to say about that. So
all right. I'm here for it. And like you said, yes, we don't necessarily always have, the time, but I'll, speak personally, me just having them to do those 2 forms every 2 weeks on the platform. And we honestly just put it into ATS because it's already there. So it was literally, I would just take 15, 20 minutes every 2 weeks to go through each form, look at the numbers. And I did start an Excel spreadsheet. So putting all that into the Excel spreadsheet, looking at the total number, how that has changed, and then looking at the team average. And I never thought I would be a person and say, oh, look at me using quantitative data. But
and I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot to mention that, but that's such a great tool, right? Because now I have numbers to back me up, and when I go talk to a coach, exactly. If I told them, hey, your athlete's going through it, like, how we gonna make this work? Like, we got a big game coming up this week, or a big series coming up this week, and our athletes are saying X, Y, and Z. How we gonna make this work? Yeah. So, and then now you go to, like, this is our team average for in between this 2 week block. Hey, coach, what can we do? How can we make this work? Yes. And usually coaches are like, what? Like, oh my God. Like, coaches who really know it, like, oh man, all right, now I gotta we might have to change it up a little bit. And so I think that's important, right? And I'm glad you mentioned that, so other athletic trainers know that to start doing that as well. Like I said, it's hard for big teams. I get it. It's hard.
I get it.
But once you start, if you can start small and then get bigger as you go,
yes,
you get bigger as you go. So like
time consuming, and like you said, I would have those conversations with my coach, like, oh, the numbers was a little high this week, so maybe we should do this. And I can honestly say my coaching staff was on board from the get-go. Like, I had even talked to them before I implemented it. Like, I'm really thinking about looking at, just the mental health aspect for them, being as though I am who I am. And I'm very open with my patients, like, don't talk to me or don't try to text me or whatever between this time because I have therapy. And they were like, you go to therapy? So it's like, yes, like it is a thing. And they're like, oh, well, we didn't think you had anything going on. Exactly. That's the thing.
But modeling behavior, right?
And that's when I'm like, oh, I did yoga this morning. Or if y'all want to do yoga as a team, let me know. We can. Or let's look at this app. And I'm like, just telling them and just having a conversation. Even, like you said, I can talk to them all day and they will bring up anything. But it's just.
And I tell you this, you'd be surprised at what a lot of these kids go through.
Yes.
Very surprised. No matter, and we talking about, and we can talk about, and I won't we won't go to where I was. That my mind wanted to go to stay,
right.
But no matter the situation, no matter the sport, no matter the sex of the team, whether it's men or women, everybody go through something.
Yes.
Some of these kids are going through it, especially with, we dealing with COVID. A lot of what I noticed is a lot of our the high school kids that just came in this year, or kids that have only been in school, like the sophomores, they really go through it because they shouldn't trying to feel like, okay, how do I actually excel in the classroom?
Yeah.
Because like I've been online university for the last couple of years. So like, how do I navigate actually having to come to class, being here, not just waking up at 5 minutes before class, opening my computer, logging on, and then going back to sleep, and then teaching myself the content, like, it's like, how do I do that? So a lot of these kids, what I realized, and it's the school side of things really impact a lot. And so one of the things I do, and I take that from my teaching background, is like, I tell kids, hey, like, how do you learn, right? What type of learner are you? Like, I get we're struggling, but how are you studying? How are you sleeping, right? Oh my God, talk about sleep is another big thing that's a whole nother thing we can talk about too, right?
Yes. Oh my God.
I know, and we know that research shows that like sleep is a vital aspect to mental performance and also physical performance.
Yes.
Right. So I know if I'm getting enough sleep at least 8 hours a night, hey, my mental well-being is probably a lot better than what if I only get 4.
Exactly.
I'm up thinking about, oh God, what I gotta do. Like, and I remember I told one of my kids, like, I said, I've never did an all-nighter my entire time in undergrad or in grad school. They said, what? I do all-nighters like once a week. I said, sweetheart, no. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. Like, depriving yourself of sleep is most people don't know you retain more information sleeping. like you be surprised. Come on, man. And so, like I said, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
But
it all ties in.
Everything ties in. And I think that's where I try to preach sleep. I try to, preach trying to eat nutrition. Like I said, I don't have a nutritional background, but like I try to say, hey kids, like just make sure you're eating good. Like, or if you're going to come to practice, don't not eat. And then wonder why your head hurt, and then you got to do X, Y, and Z. A, probably because you probably haven't eaten anything. You're probably dehydrated, and 2, you haven't put any carbs on your carbs are fuel, right? You haven't put any carbs in your stomach yet. And you wonder why you're not. But hey,
that's a whole nother episode.
Whole nother episode. But like I said, all that ties into it, right? Yes. All that ties into it. And I think, we as ATs, we wear so many different hats. All the time. COVID has really shown us like how many hats we do wear. Yes. How we constantly have to change things up all the time. And just being flexible and not being afraid to also sometimes say no in some aspects. And again, I think modeling behavior is really important because our athletes look up to us as role models majority of the time. Because one thing I can say for sure, a lot of kids that I've worked with in my career so far, they come from homes like I grew up in, single parent homes where like you might not have a specific parent in the household, so they go to their athletic trainer as a role model, right? They look like, hey, like big brother, dad, uncle, sister, auntie. That's what athletic trainers do, and they do I think we do a great job of supporting our kids and making sure that they're not only taken care of physically, but taken care of mentally. And then sometimes we also got to know, like, hey, like I got to know when to pull back and let the forms do the work, because having 14 individual conversations once a week with a kid may be a little bit too much.
Right.
But maybe having a form like you have the PHQ9 and the GAS 7, like having those maybe with a little comment section at the bottom to maybe it's a little bit easier. And then if you need to follow up, you follow up. So and you refer like, and I always say we do the same thing when it comes to an orthopedic evaluation, right? We say, hey, this kid got something going on. I might not feel 100% comfortable handling this. Let me refer.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Same idea with when it comes to mental health. Hey, I feel like something funky going on. I don't like it. I don't know how to handle it. Let me refer. And that's where you get, like you said earlier, you get your team physician involved. You have or you get your school counselors involved. I think that's hopefully the next step is to of where athletic trainers can take this and start getting campus services involved, trying to get them involved, or even having a person who comes to campus once a week or once or twice a week to meet with the athletes, whether it be virtual, because now that's a better option for a lot. We've seen telemedicine is a little bit better, especially for therapy wise. I think that's where we're going to really start to see a lot shine in the next couple of years with mental health and athletic training, because we get to find a way to support our athletes in different realms now, right? We get to figure it out, start developing new ideas, new way of thinking. And a lot of our athletes they want it. They just want to know if you offer it.
Yes. Yes.
They want it. They just might not be vocal in asking for it, but they just want to know if it's available. And I think you have that conversation with, like, at the beginning of the year, having that conversation with your student services department, right? Saying, hey, what's our policy? Can we develop a policy? And this is big. And I'm hoping everybody who's going to watch this really curious. Sitting down with your student services at the beginning of the year to ask this important question. Mm-hmm. Do I have priority if a student athlete is struggling to walk them over and for them to get seen immediately? That is one of the most important questions as a athletic training, a sports medicine department, and as a student services department, you have to start asking, right? Because let's say you have an athlete going into crisis, and you like, I don't think they need to go to crisis enough to send them to the hospital, but they definitely need to talk to somebody, a professional that's not me, right? You call over to student services, you like, hey, I need somebody to get seen. And they say, oh, well, we don't got no appointments for 2 weeks. That's right. That right there says, oh, now you tell your athlete, you got to tell your athlete, well, you can't get seen for 2 weeks. And then that might cause
anything.
So, I think I said to the staff I work with at the beginning of the year, I said, we don't want to be a headline. We do not want to be a headline. So the most important thing is to develop this relationship with student services on the front end, right? And say, hey, do I have priority? The student athlete says, they start saying X, Y, and Z, big red flag. Can I walk them straight over to your office, like, to get seen? And that's one of the things I loved about Temple, because we took mental health very seriously at Temple as a TA, and also as a club sport at AT. Like, I had priority. So if I called over and said, hey, I'm walking this kid over, so they were going to see somebody that day, like at that specific time I was walking them over. I had walked a few kids over while I was a TA, where I stopped what I was doing, like in the middle of my day, just to go walk them over. So I knew that, hey, they feeling comfortable enough to go talk to somebody. At least they have the support, as they kind of go and as they kind of make that transition. I think that's the next piece into it, is like, because a lot of big D1s have sports psychologists on staff.
They have,
but the little D2s, D3s might not have. They might have to learn, or NAIA schools, they have to revert to their student health services. So I think that's a big thing too, is getting all parties involved to say, hey, this is what our game plan is going to be. The student athlete comes and says X, Y, and Z, and then you make it work from there. So I think that's where I hopefully start to see the transition going in the next couple of years. We all start taking it a little more seriously to prevent stuff from happening, man. We saw, and I don't know, I won't speak on the entire situation, but the Stanford women's soccer player, like she's 20 years old, committed suicide. And that hurt me, because I was like, I don't know what their department does on the front end, right? I don't know what they does, but could it have been prevented?
Right.
Was she seeing somebody? Was she not? And those are questions I'll never know the answer to, but those are questions that run through my mind of how can we, a girl who is so talented, thriving in her sport, was at the same time still hurting so bad internally, right? And sometimes you'll never know. You'll never know. So I think that's the big piece of us figuring out how we can better help our athletes if we start seeing signs and being more attentive to the signs, because they will tell you what's going on, but are you that aware enough to pick it up? Yep. And that's the big piece for me. And hopefully where our profession starts to go in the next couple of years. I think that's what it is.
I agree. And I definitely, you kind of touched on it, a mental health EAP.
Yes.
And I know, a lot of athletic trainers don't have it, but I'm thankful to say my team and we have a mental health EAP. That's part of our policy and procedures. And we've included our team physician as well as the head over in, I feel like our term is health counseling, whatever the case may be. Yeah. So the head over there, she's involved, and like we have a direct line to her so that we can, have that open communication. And I think we also involve the public safety on campus. So it's we have that, and we haven't had to implement it a lot, but we have it and it's worked to my knowledge. So I think if we can maybe, make that a standard, like we have, all these other policy and procedures, let's make the mental health EAP a part of our policies and procedures. And it's something else that we have to do, but think about the importance of it and what can come from it, just like everything else that we do. Yeah. So we're evolving.
I think the time and it just popped in my head, but you know how we have like a policy, an NATA statement on X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
I think the day that we start as a profession, we actually start to take it seriously ourselves, we would see like a lot more people start to take it seriously too. Because, we got a policy statement out on lightning. We got a policy statement out on concussion. We got a policy statement out on emergency action, like all that stuff. Okay, who is the next? When's the policy on mental health going to come out? When's that position statement on the mental health front going to come out? Because once we start seeing that, because as athletic trainers, we like to implement stuff that's based back with some type of research, right?
Evidence.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Like
it's something there. We know it's something there. So
if research is showing that almost 50% of student athletes report some type of mental health condition each year, I think at some point we got to start doing something.
Yes, right.
So
maybe I'm gonna make a little note like NATA. Can we get
man? And I don't like to use my Twitter to be calling out nobody, but I might have to put it on there. I just make a tweet about it.
I might not specifically call out anybody, but I'm gonna ask the question.
But I'm gonna ask the question. I want to know what's the NATA? When's the position statement coming out on that? Like, I think that's important, right? Because we talk about what's the next phase of our profession is continually growing, right? And as a young professional, I'm like, when I started in athletic training and seeing athletic trainers to where it is now over these I started helping out at athletic training in 2014. It is now 2022. And in the 8 years I've been involved in some capacity in athletic training, the profession has changed dramatically in 8 years. Right. So what's to know that what's going to happen in the next 8? What's going to happen in the next 2, next 3? Like, and I think we got to start as a profession. We make it, right? We make it what it's supposed to be. So I think we got to start doing some front work and some groundwork on that, and hopefully making some changes, because I think it's important. Like, mental health is important, man. We can't neglect everything else and be like, oh well, we're gonna say we champion mental health, but then okay, where's the work? Where's the how do we show we gonna put the money in our mouth?
Yes,
that's it.
Agreed. I'm here for it. I think we touched on it a little bit, but if we missed something, bring it up. What have you specifically implemented in your practice for student athlete mental well-being?
Yeah, I'm a big conversation guy. So I haven't had the opportunity yet to, really implement anything into like our EMR system because we use Epic at the university I'm at because it's tied in with our physicians. So
Got it.
it's not, I really can't do much there. So, and to do it on paper and it's kind of a little challenging too. So I have conversation, man. And my athletes can tell you that I am a big, if you walk into the AT room and you look off, I'm actually what's going on.
Right.
I won't even do rehab today. I'm big on, I will skip rehab if we can sit down and have a conversation. Because most of my kids will block out appointments for rehab. So I'll get sometimes a 20 to 30-minute conversation with a kid just to figure out what's going on. I'm like, okay, what's really going on? Like, because I know you're off. Like something's off. Because I pay a lot of attention to detail. And my kids are like, yo, how did you know that? I'm like, because I pay attention to detail. Like I pay attention to body language because I know when you had a rough day. I know when the class might have kicked you behind today or you had a test and you might have done well in the test. Okay. A lot of my athletes can tell you that I've had talks to them about okay, what's next? Okay, I know we didn't do so great here. How do we continue moving forward? And I try to, paint the picture for them of I've been through it. And I remember one of my athletes in particular, she was taking a test. I think she was taking an anatomy physiology test. And she was like, I didn't do so good. I said, okay. I said, how'd you study? And then we broke it down that way. I said, we're not even going to do rehab today. Let's just talk about how we can get you better in the classroom. Because when you're better in the classroom, you're better in rehab.
Yep.
I know that. I've seen that. That's your track record, right? When you're focused and school's going good, you are wired in our rehab, and the work that we need to put in, we put in that work, right? But when you're not, I know you're distracted. I know something's going on. So how can we make sure that? And I give my kids days off for mental health reasons. Hey, take the day off. I say you're giving me some time to blow over and do some stuff anyway. So take the day off for rehab. Go catch up on schoolwork.
Yeah.
Use the time because some of my kids we usually do a pre-practice stuff, or some of my kids will come in even as a rehab session early in the day and then come back for pre-practice. So some of my kids are getting double in the day. And sometimes I say, hey, listen, let's skip rehab for today. We'll do everything before practice. Go get some stuff done. Go take a nap. Go eat. Go do something. Exactly. And then we'll worry about the rehab stuff later. So I think for me, that's kind of the stuff that I implement. Really giving my kids grace, and making sure that they feel supported as best I can. I would say you can't reach everybody, right. But if you can reach one person, I think that's important. And I always tell my kids, no matter where I go, wherever athletic training takes me, our relationship I still got a phone. So
exactly, yeah.
So and that's kind of what I abide by. I would love in the next phase of my career, as I start getting growing in the profession, to really start to implement something EMR based like you did, even on a tablet where it's hey, you just fill on a Google form, you just fill this out, X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
And then that information will then go to myself, go to coaching staff, goes to if we have a sports psychologist on staff, a psychologist as well. And then based off, if the number is, let's say if I'm doing the HADs, if the number is 14, I'm probably going to flag that. Right. And then that'll warrant a conversation. And I might say, hey, I'm probably having a conversation anyway, so I'll probably already know. So I'm probably hey, I might call coach or may call, the sports coach, hey, I may send somebody to go come see you for an appointment. So that's where really kind of I would see the chain of command kind of going. I won't say I'm the head of it, but I would say everything kind of starts with me because I see the most on a given day. Right. I hear the most, I feel the most. And I think that's an important thing too. As an athletic trainer, we feel a lot. Especially when your athlete come to tell you something that's gut wrenching, you dang, like, how do I, and I'm not trying to put it off like and saying that it's hurtful, but or like it's hurting me, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I have those adult conversations with my kids about life, and I'm like, my kids can tell you, like, I've made some of my kids, like, we have mental health talks, and some of my kids bawling their eyes out of my office, like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm okay with that, right? Because that tells me they feel that comfortable enough to share that emotion with me. That makes me know that they're feeling it. Like, they know that there's somebody there that at least supports them. Somebody is paying attention and sees what they're going through. So I think that's really what I kind of do in my clinical practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna lie, it does take a toll on me a little bit. Sometimes it can. But I know that at the end of the day, like, this is the work. I don't believe that God doesn't put me on this earth to do a job.
Right.
And this is unfortunately the work that I get to do every day, right? I always believe when I was in undergrad, in school, one of my mentors asked me, "What do you think your life's purpose is?" And I told him my life's purpose is to impact lives. And
Mm-hmm.
he was like, "What do you mean by that?" I was like, "My job on a daily basis is to impact somebody's life. I don't care if it's an athlete, student athlete. I don't care if it's a coach. I don't care if it's a coworker. I don't care if it's a custodial guy that comes in and helps clean the office. I don't care what it is. If I'm impacting somebody's life in a given day, I'm okay. My job is done for the day. So for me, I just get to live out my life's purpose through doing athletic training and really being a little more holistic and mental health focused. So yeah, that's pretty much what I kind of get myself into.
Amen. I mean, I'm gonna say we could probably just end there. Like, we living out the purpose. That's all that matter. Like,
The purpose. That's it. That's
period.
it.
I think that's probably where we're very similar. And I usually tell people, like, my purpose as an athletic trainer is to help others. And even if it's just one person, then I'm walking in my purpose, literally.
Exactly.
So it's like we took it to church, y'all. Like,
yeah, it's Sunday, so I'm gonna give you a little.
yeah,
I grew up in the church, so I'm gonna give you a
amen.
little sermon every now and then. But
And I ain't mad at it. I appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you for listening to this part one of our recording with Aaron Jackson. We'll have part two out next week. A lot more information about young professionals starting off career. We're really looking forward to getting that one out as well. If you're interested or willing to help, we are offering our Throw a Lifeline program where we are helping to fund and then crowdsourcing any other funding to help athletic trainers get the supplies they need to take care of those that they serve. We look forward to speaking with you next episode.